Hey beloveds, my name is Roddy Bell Shelton Biggs. My pronouns are they and them. I serve as the intern minister here at UUFF, and I've got a story for you today. Our story is titled The Wind of Change. John Murray comes to America, 1770. Over 200 years ago, when the United States of America was still the 13 colonies, there lived a man named John Murray. John Murray and his wife Eliza lived in a country called England. They were very religious people. Every Sunday they got up early, got dressed, and ate their breakfast, and went to church. Sometimes John Murray would preach a sermon, talk to the people about God. Now, their church wasn't a place to be happy. No one smiled, no one laughed, no one sang, because the followers of that religion, called Calvinism, believed almost all people were going to hell. They believed that God would only let a few people into heaven, no matter what people did, even if they tried really, really hard to be nice and tried really, really hard to be good. They still couldn't go to heaven, no matter what. And so the religion in that church was very serious business, and people were expected to be serious too. But one day, John and Eliza Murray heard of a man named Mr. Reilly. Mr. Reilly was of a different religion, a religion that said people didn't have to go to hell, a religion where people could be happy. Finally, after thinking and talking about it for weeks, John and Eliza decided to listen to what Mr. Reilly had to say. The next Sunday, they got up early. They ate their breakfast, got dressed, and went to Mr. Reilly's church instead of their own. At that church, people smiled. Some actually laughed. When it came time for the sermon, Mr. Reilly got up to preach. He said, God loves all his children. God doesn't have favorites. Everyone in the universe has the chance to go to heaven and be saved from the fires of hell. Salvation is universal. Mr. Reilly was a Universalist. And after hearing his sermon, John and Eliza decided they were Universalist too. But the people at their old church weren't Universalist. Mr. Murray, they said, very stern, have you and your wife been going to hear that heretic, Mr. Reilly? Yes, we have, answered John Murray. And you don't believe such nonsense, that all people have a chance to be saved? Yes, we do. Mr. Murray, they said appalled, you mustn't say such things. Yes, said John Murray, I must. And they said, oh no, you won't. And he said, oh yes, I will. And they said, well, you can't say them here. You and your wife both have to leave. Poor John and Elizabeth Murray. None of their old friends would talk to them, and they were lonely and sad. Then Eliza had a baby which helped them be happy for a while. But then the baby got sick, and Eliza got sick, and John had to borrow money to pay the doctors. He borrowed more and more money to see more and more doctors, but they couldn't help. His wife and his baby died. And then he was arrested because he couldn't pay back the money he had borrowed. So there was John Murray. He sat all alone in a cell with no job, no money, no family, no friends. He decided he had failed God and failed his family and failed himself. He decided he was never going to be a part of a church again. He decided he was never going to preach again, ever. After a few days, Eliza's brother paid the money that John owed, and John was set free. But John wasn't happy in England anymore. He wanted a new life in a new land. He bought a ticket on the sailing ship Hand in Hand. The ship had a great white sail that were filled by the wind, and the wind blew and blew. The wind blew John Murray all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, far away from England to a new land. But the wind that blew John Murray to that place he hadn't planned to go. He ended up in New Jersey instead of New York. The Hand in Hand became stranded on a sandbar off the coast, and the sailors couldn't move the ship because the wind kept blowing them ashore. Because there wasn't much food on the ship, John Murray climbed out and washed ashore through the marsh near Badger Bay. He met a farmer named Thomas Potter, who invited him to his house and gave him supper. Now Thomas Potter also believed in a loving God, and he believed in universal salvation. He believed in it so much that 10 years before John Murray had shown up at his doorstep, blown by that wind, Thomas Potter had built a little church all by himself. For 10 years, he had been waiting for the right preacher to come. And now that preacher was here. But John Murray didn't want to preach. Not at all. Thomas Potter argued with him and talked to him and prayed over him. And still, John Murray didn't want to preach. I swore I will never preach again, John Murray said, ever. But Thomas Potter said, I believe that the wind that brought you here to my doorstep was the breath of God. And I believe God sent you here to preach in the church that I have built. I believe that the wind will never change until you have preached to the people a message of God. Tell me, sir, if that wind does not change by Sunday morning, will you take that as a sign from God himself, and will you preach again? John Murray thought and thought about that, and finally he said, I will. The wind blew and blew for days and kept the boat from leaving the shore. The wind didn't change. So, on Sunday morning, on the 13th of September, in the year of 1770, while that wind was still blowing, John Murray got up early, got dressed, ate his breakfast, and went to church. And he preached. And so ends our story.